Welcome to the Treasury Update Podcast, coffee break sessions presented by Strategic Treasurer, covering foundational topics and core Treasury issues in about the same amount of time it takes you to drink your cup of coffee. I'll be your host, Jason Campbell, Business Development Leader at Strategic Treasurer. Welcome back to another episode of the Coffee Break Sessions. I'll be your host, Jason Campbell, Business Development Leader here at Strategic Treasurer. Joining me today is Paul Galloway, Senior Advisor at Strategic Treasurer. Paul, once again, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Appreciate you having me on here again.
I always love talking to you. I think you always bring some great points. I think our listeners probably appreciate all the words of wisdom you've been giving them, and especially of these past 3 episodes that we've done in regards to payments so far. And so continuing forward with the payment theme here, we're going to kick it over into talking a little bit more API and API types more particularly. And I know this is, when we think about API, application programming interface, we hear API, we're hearing it, probably that acronym more and more often as we think about technology advances and how it's utilized in the Treasury world. And so, looking forward to having some insight for you to provide our listeners around this particular topic. So let's kick it and get right into the subject here. What are APIs and how do they work?
API stands for Application Programming Interface. It includes a set of definitions and protocols that may be used to integrate application software. You can think of it in terms of interoperability. What that means is that it's a way for systems and applications to connect and communicate.
So as we think about, communication, I always say communication is key, right? Two-way open dialogue, having, again, ease, access points, things of how to do your day-to-day more effectively, more efficiently. What APIs are out there in the universe?
Yeah, so there's a variety of them, and there are 4, common types of web-based APIs. Public, partner, internal, and composite are the common ones. Public is available and used by an outside developer or business, and sometimes is referred to as open or external API. Partner is available to specific developers and businesses and typically fosters business-to-business relationships, or B2B. There are agreements and licenses that are in place that outline each party's rights to use the API. The next one is internal. It's available only to those within an organization and are sometimes referred to as private APIs. These APIs typically connect internal admin systems, as an example. The next one is composite. This connects 2 or more APIs to increase the efficiency of operations where they are related or depend on each other. So you may have APIs that stand alone, they provide a function, and they become more efficient if they are related and depend on each other to put them together.
What are the common API protocols?
Yeah, so the common API protocols out there are REST, RPC, and SOAP. And so REST is the Representational State Transfer, or REST, allows systems to share information securely. No information is stored. It can aid in development and implementation and is typically pretty scalable. RPC is Remote Procedural Call. It's a basic API and is one of the first forms of API ever designed, is RPC. And it allows for remote computers within a shared ecosystem to share data and information. And the last one, SOAP, is Simple Object Access Protocol. And it typically relies on XML to support a range of communication protocols and has a clearly defined network, or framework, I should say.
So now that we talked about what types of APIs are out there and the common protocols here, what else should people know about APIs? And more importantly, how does it relate to Treasury?
So what I'll do is talk about how it's being used, talk about relationship to banks, talk about how it's being utilized amongst fintechs. So I think APIs are definitely relevant to treasury. They are reliable. They help complete tasks as expected. It's secure, it's efficient, and can work with a variety of systems. Treasury, just ignoring banks and fintechs, can utilize APIs internally to connect their admin systems, ERP, other frameworks within the organization to talk to each other and share information and data. So this is really, from an internal standpoint, is really important to Treasury, given that visibility to cash, understanding where everything is at, validating that all transactions have cleared and are true, reconciliation, that process, the ability to forecast projections, whether in combination with an annual budget or an FP&A team. APIs can be utilized to help facilitate that. So when we think about banks, there isn't a treasury team out there that doesn't have a relationship with at least a single bank. It's typically multiple banks. And so what we're seeing today is all the tier one banks have complete sets of APIs, a stable of APIs. They continue to add to them and develop them. And some of the super regional banks are also developing APIs today. It's starting to trickle down to smaller banks as well. It takes time for this stuff to be adopted and integrated. It does take effort as well in terms of cost and capabilities of a bank to be able to provide those. But what they do for the banks themselves is it allows the banks to connect to systems. We can talk about what we talked about before, connecting to admin systems or ERPs within an organization. Banks can connect to these platforms with the use of APIs. They can help make things more efficient. Having banks and a stable of APIs and the adoption of these APIs is becoming more and more common. And we think about treasury platforms or treasuries that are redeveloping their processes, procedures, and systems, meaning they're updating or upgrading. Fintechs come to mind. So your treasury management systems, your treasury risk management systems, treasury aggregators, all these tools to help treasury and accounting manage cash, whether it's AP or AR, reconciliation platforms. The fintechs can provide platforms for connecting to all these different platforms through development APIs. We're starting to see that become more and more common with treasury management system providers. They develop APIs to make these connections. And so from a treasury standpoint, becoming more efficient is important to them because there's demand on treasurers today to be more than just have the ownership of all the cash and everything associated with cash. They have to be able to report, inform, provide strategic thinking. They have to do forecasts. They have to ensure that all the systems and processes are covered in terms of risks. So you're mitigating risks associated with the activity that they're engaged in, whether it's processes, dual control, or it's systems that provide the security, the pathways, the platforms, the shields, the firewalls, all these things that protect the corporate's treasure. And by default, treasury is a protector of a company's or organization's treasure. And that means all the cash and everything that cash is invested in. So that's their job, that's their duty. APIs help them do that more efficiently and in a secure manner.
You relating it and how it impacts treasury was spot on. So thank you for that. And I'm sure the listeners, again, probably took some real good key nuggets away from that. So thank you for joining me today, Paul. I really appreciate it. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to another great episode of the Coffee Break Session. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback you'd like to provide us, please drop us a note at podcast@strategictreasure.com. And until next time, take care.
This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.